waste any of this.
You don't ever waste time.
Somebody may say something important, as unlikely as that
Or
may seem,
embarrassing.
and we wouldn't want to miss it.
Yeah. I'm the guy that gets caught doing embarrassing stuff.
Yeah, so well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Appalachian Podcast.
Did you do a check, Billy? I mean, have you lost your professional standing here?
You know what? I see it going. I'm going to go ahead and trust it. I think we're good. I think we're good. Well, it's my locked, stocked, and two smoking barrels co-host over there, Simon Winch. Simon, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Billy.
Saturday
You've just fed me a fantastic steak. How can I not be doing good?
Well, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. I had to yank you out here on a Saturday afternoon. We haven't done that in quite some time.
Oh, this is bribery.
It
I get
pretty
it.
much was, you know.
Yeah, I
it
get
was,
it.
You know, you have to operate in that kind of society, and I also have to have you slow and docile when you go back and have to deal with your wife over this as well.
Slow and docile. Docile, Billy. Docile. It's in the enunciation.
Well, hey, this is Appalachia, not Liverpool, so we'll say things.
Liverpool. I'm no scouser, for goodness sake. Anyway, carry on, Billy.
You know, I was coming down the road today. I think I was driving my kids or something. I got to thinking about it. And I said, I've been doing this show for over 2 years now, and what just a phenomenal group of guests we've had on here. I mean, top from anything you can imagine. We're not, our niche is we don't have a niche. We've had everything on here. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun connecting those dots and piecing things together and seeing all these opportunities persist. And it's been a lot of fun being on this end of things. But I realized coming down the road today that Simon is the talent. And I think I'm the guy that needs to facilitate. Like, I'm the point guard here, and I got no problems being like an Allen Iverson, but I think the Jordan of this show is Simon. Because I was thinking about him sometimes potentially canceling on shows and stuff, and we can limp something home. The one he did skip was me and my Iraq buddies, and we can sit around and talk all kinds of shit drunk about stuff like that. It would have been nice to have him there to be able to ask some questions and maybe jog up some things that we hadn't thought about. But, you know, it's tough to try and schedule a show because every time we come, Simon, he has something going with every single guest. It doesn't matter what this person is, where they come from, what corner of the earth. You know, now everybody recognizes the voice. And the last show we did was phenomenal. I've had all kinds of people reach out and say what a show that was with Philip Gibbs. If you haven't bought his book yet or went and checked him out, real quick, I want to throw his stuff out there. Good Lord. Where is it going to be at? Today's the 11th, isn't it? So
I believe, I don't know what day of the week it is ever.
I think today's the 11th. So we're going to say you're not going to hear this, but he's at Blacksburg Books. Tomorrow for our Patreon subscribers at patreon.com/getontap, you'll get this show a little bit early. It won't come out for another few days for everybody else, but Patreon, the dog-eared page in Danville, the 13th, Rocky Mountain Train Depot. That's where most of our people are going to hit up. And then September 21st and 23rd, he's going to be in Carolina. We'll discuss that more as he comes because we're trying to maybe sit down and do another little thing with him and maybe some local moonshiners to cross-reference some of this, some of that murder and mystery. But it was a great show. I had a blast, and
yeah,
it was really informative.
It was interesting in so much as we didn't really delve into what was in the book. I mean, we kind of skirted around it a little bit. We avoided giving away, you know, who did it. Was it with the lead pipe in the kitchen with the butler, you know, or was it Professor Purple? Who knows? So not touching on the content of the book, but actually just having a sit-down discussion with a guy was fascinating. I mean, you know, as a chap with a PhD, a professional musician, he's written a book. He's got so much. It was a wealth of knowledge and cultural knowledge at that as well. So yeah, we had a blast.
Well, and he's well traveled as well, so it was good to sit there and somebody that's got that much kind of experience and to be able to kind of piece things together as far as that's concerned. It was a good time. I really had a blast. I'm glad he came on the show. So for everybody, as far as that's concerned, go back and listen to that one. No difference today. Real quick before we do dive in, we've had a request from Spike Cohen that you do, in fact, get yourself a Twitter account. You should already be on there, Twitter, X, whatever it's called right now, because we want to do the spaces stuff. And I asked Simon, I asked him last night, I said, Spike had asked me anything for an hour or so. I was like, I'm going to keep him busy. I said, I said, so if we can talk Simon into getting on this platform, you do jump on some spaces with us here and there. And he said, absolutely. And he said he should already be on the platform anyway. So I'm going to create you an account tonight, maybe even before we leave or some point in time, and I'll give you the keys to it. You do what you will. But because I thought about it, and what a way to be able to get on there with him, maybe Chip, Brandon, out in Floyd, all at one time. Get on there. You don't have to be like this. You could just have your phone walking around. You could be sitting on your throne.
I'm cursed enough for using my phone. Now that I was actually caught, this is going back several years, whilst I was offshore, I said this messaging thing is nonsense. Blah, blah, blah. If you're going to use a phone, pick it up and have a chat with someone. Now I find myself, I just can't, the depths of depravity that I've fallen to with this social media shit is.
Well, on the other hand, you're inspiring a bunch of people. You're getting a bunch of people to tune. If for nothing noise, for the soothing nature of your own voice and accent, people are going to tune in and listen, and your message is going to reach other people. And at this point in time,
yeah, but I don't really have a fixed message.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the irony of it all.
You kind of do. You lead by example. You know what I mean? This generation coming up behind us, we got to do something. So, we're going to get Simon here soon.
Oh,
I'm going to create him something. He doesn't have to get on at all points in times, but I feel like he'll jump in on a conversation here, there, maybe jump on some spaces, just because of the amount of people we can reach in the amount of time. We've got that other British guy who's big anti-government like you from Tennessee. I think we're looking to collaborate with him around the beginning of September, so we'll work on that as well. I think his name is Bloody Revolution or something.
What could possibly go wrong?
You mean us and Smokey and Liquor and Floyd County and...
I tell you, I'm going to get them Fed boys after me, and they're going to send me backpacking.
They're already after us. Hey, by the way, all we need is like 200 more followers on Facebook. We'll reach 10,000 in a couple of years. 10,000 gets us on every single FBI, CIA list. All the Alphabet Boys for 10,000. So
we're already on.
We really need. I know, but we really need y'all to just go ahead and push it on through for us
to make it official.
Because
I'm trembling in my boots. I'm so scared.
Yeah. Big shout out real quick too, also the Rocky Mountain Burger Company for all they do for us. Brian's a huge help. They got a lot of stuff going on here lately. Check out the Harvester and their shows so you can show up down there right before one of those, get you a drink, good cocktail. The burger's been awesome in there every time. Same thing with Rocky Mountain Smokehouse and Buddy. Buddy's hooking us up here in the next few weeks as well. We're going to try and do more shows on both of those locations, hopefully in the future with an audience. People have been asking us about that quite a bit, so I'm thinking those two spots would be really nice.
I'm going to try
one at Buddy's.
I'm going to try and get these guys actually using. We've been promoting all about Franklin County, about local produce, supporting local farmers. I'm going to try and get these guys into supporting, some of the local produce that we have here, particularly ground beef, for whatever product they're putting out, and see if we can move that a little bit closer to that community spirit. And if it works, it works. Yeah. But I'm going to give it a college try.
Well, we can figure. I mean, look, there's always ways around everything. We'll talk about that off air because I think there's subliminal, not necessarily subliminal, but I mean, if you market things right, it ends up being how it's supposed to work. But so for them two guys, big thanks. We're going to go ahead and get to our show and our guest here today because we're super excited about this. I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself because this show just kind of came up.
We're not quite sure how we really should pronounce your very Dutch surname.
Mike.
No, surname. Oh, you see, I've caught you Americans with the phrase surname. Your last name. It was an English thing. That was an English joke.
Well, I appreciate that. Before we get into that, I do need to correct you on the use of your English. And I appreciate the fact you having informed me that you're from London, but it's pronounced docile, not docile. Okay. We need to get a few things straight or we're not going to get along today.
I'm grossly outnumbered here.
Yes,
and I'm in a corner with my back against the wall. So I'm already in a defensive posture.
Well, you can see the door, so you can see who's coming.
I can also jump out of possibly two windows or be thrown out of, depending upon your perspective.
Well, you can call me ter MaaT. But the rest of your audience can call me Mike.
There we go, Mr. ter MaaT. It almost sounds like a vegetable.
Mine would have definitely sounded hillbilly as shit. If I'd have said ter MaaT or something like that.
Well, that's not too bad. And considering we are in, what would you call it, the Scottish Hills?
Absolutely.
The equivalent.
Scots-Irish Hills.
The Irish Hills?
Yes,
here
indeed.
in Appalachia?
Well, with the Dutch accent, there's normally a little bit of, in there.
There frequently is, although I'm like 5 generations Chicago. So,
thank goodness you've got rid of
the
it.
Dutch is kind of
because
culturally been left behind a long time ago.
The Dutch accent, and I know the Dutch love their accent, but as a foreigner listening to a Dutch
nothing
accent,
similar could be said about the Brits.
Oh, absolutely.
No. They're not proud of their accent whatsoever.
No.
As a matter of fact, they don't even have an accent.
Not in the slightest. But having worked with the Dutch, I mean, for many, many, many years, they have, and particularly with my offshore previous career, their engineering is sublime when it comes to oil field support and subsea engineering. They
water control in general. They are the leaders in the world.
Absolutely, they are,
and have been contracted as such in various places in the United States.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've worked on Dutch vessels in the Gulf of Mexico many, many times.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Was this part of a penal colony outsourcing project, or how did you end up out there? Or should I say, how did you make it back? How did you make it back? Did you have to elude the guards like James Bond style to make it back?
It was. Oh, Mike! I think I've just been bested. Oh,
I think
shit.
so. This is a first.
Or in our case, we would call it worsted.
Worsted.
I mean, we lob. We're lobbing small artillery back and forth at each other. And every now and then, you might get a little hit to jar somebody, but he dropped
straight at it.
The mother of all bombs. Just.
But and the thing that we would say, and this is on a massive vessel, and every now and again there would be a Dutchman on his Dutch vessel,
and
you could hear them coming, clip clop, clip clop, clip clop, clip clop.
That's not funny, but keep going.
He'd be wearing his wooden clogs,
of course,
on a ship,
of course,
as a Dutchman,
right? And I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't make fun of those.
Well, I'm about to.
Okay. This might hurt.
Well, it's gonna be ruthless, because the comment that we use when you hear this clip clop, it's wooden shoes, wooden listen.
I'm not having it. I'm not listening to that. Can't hear it. Gonna edit that out.
I'm sure you are.
That hurts.
It's ruthless.
I
mean, we take no prisoners on this show.
I appreciate that. While the clip clopping is getting farther away as they leave you, what they're saying is that proves it. If you're not Dutch, you
ain't
not much.
That's the other one. If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. And you know what? As much, you got to sit there and just, oh bloody hell, I've got to take this shit again. But you had to admire the engineering.
Oh, there's no question about that.
Within the project that they were doing, and they are undoubtedly.
And for the benefit of any of your listeners who are of German extraction, it can fairly be said that Dutch engineering is second to none in the world.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I've worked enough with them. I mean, there's an element of arrogance behind it, and I used to make some shocking jokes with the Dutch, and get away with it. Most of the time because we were all legless in Rotterdam. So that levels the playing field significantly, I may add.
Of course. As everyone is in Rotterdam.
Yeah. But no, I've got a great respect for the Dutch and their seafaring history and their subsea engineering. It is, without question, the best in the world.
Yeah. Well, out of necessity.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Being the mother of all invention.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's a
huge proportion of the country would be underwater were it not for
exactly.
that.
I tip my hat to your Dutch
ancestors. Most of the engineering work that my family did in the United States was in what we call sanitation engineering. My family was in garbage.
I was about to say there was another punchline. I'm just on the tip of my tongue.
No. It can't get any worse than reality.
Number one in the number two business.
Number one is a number two business, and number two is the number one business.
Roger that.
Yep. My family was in garbage since the turn of the century, the previous century. For the youngsters in the audience, that's 123 years ago.
For goodness sake.
Yeah. My grandfather's father, my grandfather, my dad turned down a chance to run the garbage business.
That's big money.
Much to my disappointment.
Big money too.
Oh, absolutely. And commercial garbage?
Oh.
Tremendous.
And what city was this in?
Chicago.
Oh, yeah. And then,
I was about to say until the mafia may have got their
that's what I'm
fingers in
saying.
it.
Well, interestingly, it was a violent time, but remember, just in the same sense that when the federal government of the United States regulates businesses, you limit competition, it drives up the profitability.
The margin gets bigger.
Right. So when the mafia, and most of the mafia in those days wasn't mafia, it was, Dutch families. But when a combination of Dutch family control, this is back in the pre-Wayne Huizinga days. My aunt, by the way, used to babysit Wayne Huizinga. That's how far back we're going.
I'm going to watch my P's and Q's from now on. Let me tell you.
When the Dutch families and eventually Italian families were in the business, the Italian families are mostly in the business in New York, not Chicago. But when that was a time when families would control who had what territory, it would eliminate competition and would drive up profitability. And you see that in industries that are regulated by the U.S. federal government as well.
Well,
which is why some of them don't complain.
And at that point, it's a monopoly and you're writing your own check. So I get that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And people will pay good money to have their garbage pulled away.
Absolutely, they will.
Yep.
Because when it's left honking on the sidewalk, that's no good for anyone's business. No,
it's a bad day. So Chicago was all Dutch garbage, very small companies, and they were consolidated. Huizinga's father actually began the consolidation, eventually Waste Management, Inc., eventually consolidated all of Chicago, and then, of course, New York, and spread nationwide, and that was how Waste Management, Inc. became one of the biggest companies in the world.
Big money in waste. In fact, you know what? When you control a monopoly, there's big money in everything.
There's big money in anything. That is exactly right.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship is the way to not only profitability, but innovation. And those things are inextricably linked, even in garbage.
Well, and that's where we're all lacking in today's public education system. Is we should be creating critical thinkers that then become entrepreneurs. And as soon as you've got entrepreneurs, guess what? You've got a thriving economy. Entrepreneurs make a thriving economy. So to stifle critical thinking, you're opening a horrible door to failure.
There's no question about it. Ironically, I think that our public school system is set up to educate children in a way that makes them more, and I choose my words carefully, docile rather than disruptive.
Touché.
And
there's a little bit of French.
And here's to touching you too. What we really need is to teach the kids to be more disruptive. And in that sense, I think it's also ironic, not only that we educate them incorrectly, but the school system is set up incorrectly, trying to be impervious to disruption itself by not allowing private schools to compete on a level playing field.
One of the worst pieces of legislation was No Child Left Behind.
Absolutely. I wish the legislation had been left behind.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
no state was left behind by the federal government imposing no child be left behind.
And therein lies the problem. What is the federal government doing, even with its grubby little fingers, on education?
The answer to that is violating the 10th Amendment of the Constitution.
There you go.
The Department of Education should not have existed in the first part. And consider, and I'm sorry, we don't have to talk about politics if you don't want to, or policy, and it'd be fine with me, but consider that if any other citizen in either the United States or any other backwater nation in, for example, Europe, which is redundant, were to bribe a state in order to conduct certain policy, you would consider that a felony.
Absolutely. And this is what they're doing with the carrot and stick. We've said this on the show countless times. The carrot and stick policy of federal government it's absolutely corrupt.
And ruthless.
Yeah.
Inescapable.
Yeah, you can't get around it, apart from getting states' rights back, which, as now as Spike Cohen very delicately presented it to me, I am now a born again libertarian. And that was funny how he pointed that out, but it was a good setup. And I've been so disappointed with the two tiers of the Democratic and Republican system. It clearly is failed, and it's almost failed from inception. If you want to figure out where the root cause goes back, I mean, has it ever really worked? The two-party system. I suspect it probably hasn't.
Well, when it wasn't so ingrained, and when people got their news sources from the same place, which is almost never, as you probably know in American history, much of our news was always coming from different sources, local newspapers, for example.
When they had integrity.
When they had integrity, they devoted their integrity to either one party or the other for a better part of a century. But certainly since the advent of cable news, we have given up on the idea of anybody getting their news from the same source, right? You get your news from a Republican source or a Democratic source. And in this sense, I believe it was a major contributor to the dawning of a new authoritarian age, where each party has left behind what used to be their policy agenda. You don't see the Democratic Party, for example, any longer being in any real sense anti-war. They're not really in any modern sense socially liberal, even the extent to which they go around beating each other into agreeing with each other or get canceled, right? And you don't really see the Republican Party any longer maintaining a position that you would characterize as fiscally conservative any longer.
No, absolutely not.
No.
I mean, and you've just raised two very, very clear points of the two-party system failing the American citizen 100%.
100%. Each one has adopted as its primary objective keeping the other side out of power. And we know from history, mostly outside the United States, up until now, we know from history that this is where authoritarianism comes from. It comes from a politician trying to convince you, and eventually successfully convincing much of the population, that what you have to fear is not the loss of your civil liberties, but that other idiot coming to power, and therefore I need more power to protect you.
That very beautifully put, by the way. Is that not totalitarianism?
It's definitely the road to totalitarianism.
Because that's where I think we're at. I mean, we're in a position that describes what we are feeling, and don't think that the American public isn't feeling this.
The American public feels it, and I would argue doesn't quite recognize what it is that they feel.
Well, there's so much apathy involved, but don't underestimate the American public for not seeing the underlying tones of totalitarianism, authoritarianism.
Agreed.
So, at what point is that going to be impacted when the citizenry swings round and, quite frankly, says, "Screw you"?
I think it's going to be a mess. I think it'll be profound. I think it'll be a schism. I don't think it's going to be smooth. I think it's going to feel quite revolutionary. I don't mean that in a violent sense. At least I hope not. But I do think it's going to be a very disruptive, nonlinear feeling to it. And I would not be surprised if it were relatively soon. By relatively soon, I mean 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years, not 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Right. Within our lifetime, fingers crossed.
Even mine, yes.
There we go. Hey, I'm the old guy in the room too.
What year were you born, Simon?
64.
Oh, well, then you're not.
Fine vintage.
I was born in 1961.
We're still 60s kids.
And let me share something that you won't appreciate until later on, because I know that even in 1964, you were in... I'm sorry, what was the backwater nation you grew up in?
Oh, I couldn't possibly admit to that.
Okay. But in 1961, on June 20th, Roger Maris hit his 24th home run. And so I always know that Major League Baseball is not quite on track with that if no one has 24 by my birthday. A lot of your listeners will know what I'm talking about.
I tell you, that just went zoom.
No, it's not a joke. A lot of your listeners will understand that in a way that...
You'd have to put it in cricket references for him to understand.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
He's like Roger Miller.
Right.
suing
I
the
tell
hell
you
out
what,
of that.
I'm backs against the corner. Here we go.
And I do understand, as you explained to me over the phone, that sometimes when Simon does make references, there are crickets. Maybe that's what you mentioned.
Oh, many times there are crickets because of apathy.
Well, they're not chirping anymore. I think you're really onto something. I think that there is a growing sense of authoritarianism. I would not characterize it as totalitarianism, only because I think matters could conceivably get worse before they get better. So in that sense, it hasn't become total, but I would agree that
Not
it's on
yet.
exactly.
We're on the cusp.
We're on the path and quite possibly on the cusp. In that sense, I think it's very important that we don't let anyone forget, as a lot of people are wont to do, the COVID regime.
Oh,
And people are want to put it behind. Well, we all want to put it behind us, right? But we mustn't forget the lesson. We mustn't forget the frustration and frankly, the damage.
they're still punting for booster shots.
Yes.
They're still punting for that.
Yes.
Having done
absolutely.
having done irreparable damage.
I've actually had 56 shots now, so I feel pretty good about myself. I'm actually by weight 3% vaccine, so I feel pretty good about it. I figure I could take a virus in a wrestling match if nothing else.
I'd say probably any day now, and you're gonna probably did.
Well, as you might know, I'm kidding, but
I very much know you're kidding.
yeah, but I do feel badly for people who have had bad experiences with the vaccine, not only because of side effects, and I haven't seen the data lately about side effects. Oh, that's right, because it doesn't exist. But
they're not looking to collect data.
They're not really looking to collect data. But I also feel bad for folks who put a lot of eggs in that basket and just turned out to be a disappointment. And I lay that at the feet, as you and I have discussed in the past, of the federal government overpromising and not only under-delivering on the vaccine, but undelivering in terms of disclosing what it is they did and, more importantly, didn't know about the vaccines at the time. We would all have a better feel, I believe, about the vaccines if there had just been more honesty about it.
There was an abundance of outright lies when it comes to the efficacy of the vaccine, and I'm not. I'm actually a little.
The transmissibility, the efficacy, the side effect research, the masks. Put 60 seconds on the clock. Let us name the lies. Yeah.
And it concerns me that we're still tempted to call it a vaccine because under no circumstances was it ever a vaccine. It was an inoculation.
No. Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And a doctor will tell you that.
Yeah.
Even doctors that tell you to take it.
Well, exactly. Mm-hmm. And we still got the medical. There's still the medical field at the grassroots level appears to be still supporting this narrative, and the fact that the government is still looking to punt the booster shot or what might next come as another pandemic. So this state of fear is going to continue. The falsehoods from big pharma, government, and the medical industry.
One of the things that I worry about is the government's, as you put it correctly, still punting for the boosters is an indication of stubbornness that bothers me less regarding the present than it does about the future. In other words, I worry that the government's stubbornness is not merely a reflection of just unwillingness to admit human, frailty and failure and imperfection, but is more motivated by, even if subconsciously, is more motivated by if we admit that we got this at least partially wrong, do we undermine our authority for next time? I worry about that actually more than the boosters themselves.
Yeah. So they're continuing to put their eggs in the same basket. We're looking at, in my mind, science is under attack. And quite honestly, I think rightly so, because they've used science as the backstop to their argument. And
a manipulated version.
A very manipulated version. So now you've got a counter science story that's been it's been crushed. It hasn't come out. And one has to ask, How nefarious is that?
Now, by science, do you mean Anthony Fauci himself, or
Well, no,
do you mean
I'm talking about the guys
actual
that have
science
been,
with a lowercase s?
lowercase s, but the guys that have done the studies and have got, some of the data and have applied it without bias to suggest that, number one, the masks are complete bullshit.
Right.
We know they don't work.
Right.
We know that the inoculation is not a vaccine. We
Right.
know that mRNA is extremely dangerous, and we haven't even touched on,
especially in a long-term sense. By the
the
way,
long-term sense is now we're attributing this sudden death or myocarditis or whatever it may be, or the immune system attacking itself. This is something new. No, it's related to the,
of course, it's
the
related.
inoculation.
Of course, it's
and
related.
And what we're seeing is that people aren't. It's not being disingenuous, because being disingenuous is in my mind, I'm sugarcoating something. It's not disingenuous. They're damn well lying about this.
I think they're especially lying about what it is they know and don't know.
Yeah.
In other words, there are people who know things that they're lying about, but there are also people who are lying about having related information. Like they're just almost making it up out of whole cloth. And what bothers me the most is people lying about stuff that they don't have, lying about stuff that they don't know. And that's where I think you really bastardize the process of science, which undermines it going forward. One of the things that we talk about a lot in the Libertarian Party and the campaign that I am prosecuting these days is that whereas we have a time-honored tradition in this country of backing up the First Amendment by saying we all believe in a separation of church and state, when growing up, it's all part of it, you swim in it in this country, especially in those days, right? The idea that the government wouldn't mess with your First Amendment rights, that meant separation of church and state to no small extent. I believe that we need to get to that place with regard to separation of science and state, that we need to recognize that the government's got no place in matters of science. And I would include in that not only communicating about it, but investing in it, subsidizing it, and certainly commercial ventures in which public officials are taking remuneration based on the distribution of the product of such science.
Well, how much money has Fauci made on some of his patents?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, I understand, as a low estimate.
I believe it's in the millions.
I believe it probably is, but I think that what we know with some certainty is that it's in the hundreds of thousands.
And he was the one that was denying through, I think it was, well, he was outright denying gain of function, but he was doing it through such a charade of scientific language,
trying to redefine what gain of function means.
Exactly. And it was down to the technicalities,
right,
of almost,
yes, the function would gain, but that's not what we call gain of function.
Right.
Exactly.
The lunacy.
Your shirt is gray, but we don't call that gray shirt syndrome.
Right. So something was going on there, and I hope he does get pulled up and held to account.
Well, Rand Paul is going after him.
As I think he should. As I think he should.
Well, he, went out of his way to try and make Rand Paul look like, he was full of shit, basically, when they were going back and forth. And,
well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, and he took a lot of heat for it as well at the time.
Well,
he was all the COVID idiots out there. But now here we are, and we were all sitting there explaining this to people that it was all about the language. I had so many arguments about this. I was like, you can sit here and see in the man's eyes, you can see in his deflection that he is guilty of exactly what Rand Paul is bringing up. Rand Paul's not an idiot.
But also Rand Paul is a politician.
But he's a based politician. So
he's definitely non-mainstream.
Based as you can get.
He's non-mainstream. I grant you that.
Never kid a kidder, as we say. He
Yeah.
poked the wrong bear by going after Rand, and very political himself, Fauci.
Very much so.
Very much so. Not only in the big picture, but even in that moment, that really reminded me of Bill Clinton this will need explanation for the youngsters in your audience. Depends on what the word is.
Really?
I mean, it's that level of detailed, specific lying.
So this is
and
when
obfuscation.
legalese and these attorney scum that get behind supporting these people with that legalese terminology. And we can all smell it, we can sniff it, we can see it, but no one's gone to jail for it. No one's going to jail.
Well, not yet. They haven't.
It's like the open air lies. It's like he looks into when he says, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman,
right,
Miss Lewinsky." What he was really doing is he was looking at some woman behind the camera, and then he said, Miss Lewinsky. So he was speaking to Monica Lewinsky through the. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it's these little lies.
For the youngsters in your audience, he once famously said in a deposition under oath, he said, there is no sexual relationship. And later on, he was called out on it because there had been. He said, well, there had been, but there wasn't at the time that I said there is. And the attorney said, well, by your definition, that would mean that you'd be having to have sex right in the middle of our deposition. And Clinton said, that's right.
The arrogance behind that statement, I mean, if that didn't get a punch in the throat, something is horribly wrong, because I'd have throat punched that.
Well, as you should, and you're right.
Yeah.
There is something horribly wrong when people can get away with things like that. You're right. Clinton didn't go to jail. He lost his law license, which is, like taking away the driver's license from someone who has a chauffeur. It just, doesn't matter a rat's ass.
No, he's never going to practice law again. You're the president of the United States, and once you're done, especially,
No, you're on a talking tour. Come
exactly.
on. You're not practicing law ever again. Ridiculous.
He never had. There is no law practice.
Ooh. Ouch. Well, those are the only two professions, medical and law, in which you can practice and charge the arse out of the end user to the end degree. I mean, but you're a guinea pig. As far as medical and legal, those are the only two professions that you practice, for which you charge how much? $300 an hour for an attorney, and that's a pretty crappy one.
Right.
If you go into New York and some of these guys,
it definitely ranges from $200 to $2,000 an hour. It's good business if you can get it. And by the way, I take umbrage at your characterization of scum attorneys earlier. I consider that redundant and a flagrant foul of the useless language rule.
Sorry,
I understand though. I understand. But by the way, it's great to be with you here in Appalachia.
I'm very glad you've came, because again we're now making a bit of a name of ourselves with regards to that libertarian movement.
Yes, and I came anyway.
And you,
which is great. Anyway. Which is great.
Why?
Well, that was a big question. That was a big question to ask. You say, you're seeking the nomination in the Libertarian Party for president. That's a big part of the reason why you're here. But more importantly, though, is why in the hell are you actually specifically here in this little?
And the answer is that I live in Virginia, in Eastern Virginia, and I have to drive out to a meeting of the Libertarian Party of Chicago tomorrow.
Well, that makes sense logistically.
Exactly. So I had to stop in this town for gas and to use the bathroom, and I bumped into you two guys, and it's been just
we were just flagging you down
uproarious
off the street.
ever since.
It was that random.
Well, when you need directions, you usually want to be nice to the person giving them to you, because he can send you back onto the interstate.
You're exactly right. And given that I don't believe in GPS, I was at your mercy.
Oh, don't even talk to me about GPS. I went, no, let's leave GPS out of this. It's another rabbit hole.
And by the way, you guys sending me upstairs here as though it were a path to Chicago, you completely fooled me. This is not gain of function.
Well, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, it is. But I'm intrigued about your path to the libertarian movement.
Sure.
With your previous history, if you could explain what got you to where you are today, having had some of
condensed version.
Give me a condensed synopsis
version.
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah. I'll try to get under 2 minutes. Your audience may want to take a break at this point, get a sandwich, step out of the room. I'll be done in 2 minutes.
This is what they want to hear.
This is what they want to hear. Is my background?
Well, we want to.
We'll get to something more interesting as soon as we get past the background.
But we still want we still want to know the man behind, a potential presidential nomination.
Yeah.
For the Libertarian Party. There will be spin-off questions, I can guarantee.
I appreciate that. Let me start at the end and work my way to the beginning and then to the middle. As you all know, and some of your audience knows, I am seeking the nomination of the Libertarian Party for president. I believe that we have a huge opportunity in 2024, but I believe it has to be handled correctly, and that means doing a number of things profoundly differently than we have in the past. Mm-hmm. The opportunity, I think we all understand the opportunity. I spend most of my time talking about that, and I don't know that we need to. I think everyone understands. The Republican Party is a mess. The Democratic Party is a mess, not only because of what we talked about earlier. Both parties have left behind what had been their agenda. Their leadership is a mess. I think that people do sense a growing element of authoritarianism, and it is, as you pointed out, heading toward totalitarianism, and it is because of the dysfunctional two-party system. Having said that, how it manifests is absolutely growing in the minds of Americans. It is encroaching on our lives. People are increasingly aware that many of our problems are the result of bad public policy, that inflation doesn't just grow on a tree, that the amount of debt that we have piled onto the federal government of the United States doesn't just grow on a tree either. And by the way, I think that Americans are much more open to an anti-war policy than ever before. Speaking of Democrats and Republicans colluding in a way that does not align with our values and interests, I don't think it's any longer the case that there is an example out there that the American public would point to in the main and say, that particular militaristic intervention was a good idea. At some point, we just have to admit that while tactically we're good at certain things, as a matter of strategy, we suck. That we're good tactically at blowing things up and killing people and opening sea lanes and taking land and holding it. And we're even pretty good at toppling governments as long as you don't mind the secrets eventually coming out. But as a matter of long-term strategy, it is just not true that the American federal government has used its military in a way that advances what most Americans would characterize as something that's in their long-term strategic interests. And for these reasons, I think that Americans are frustrated with our government, and I think that it aligns with libertarianism as a solution, both ethically and operationally. And we can talk more about that. Me in particular, to give you the more condensed version, I grew up as a fiscally conservative economist. I was an economist for 2 or 3 decades. I worked in a couple of banks, coming out of business school in the 80s. I went to graduate school in Washington, D.C. at the George Washington University. I worked for a couple of international agencies. I worked for the White House for a couple of years. Over the years, I've taught economics at 3 different universities. I worked in the banking.
Was that as an economist at the White House? So you were giving financial strategies with regards to.
It was mostly the budget. Yeah, the budget. It was mostly helping a variety of other economists and analysts understand the budget control law that had been put in place a few years earlier.
I didn't know we had one.
No, we don't for all practical purposes anymore. In those days we did. We called it Graham-Rudman or Graham-Rudman-Hollings, which is a good thing. There were certain controls that made it difficult, but unfortunately not impossible for Congress to spend money in certain ways. That's all gone by the wayside, as everyone.
Very self-evident.
So. Yeah.
So what administration was that under?
George Herbert Walker Bush.
Okay, HW. So
that's going back. We're talking 90, 91, 92.
Okay,
going back.
That's, well, hey, I mean that's one of the that's one of those "how do you like me now" moments when you say, "Well, I had a White House economist sitting in here that came into here to come on the show." You know what I mean? Like my wife, I'm encouraging her to go get her PhD and be a doctor. It's like, well, even go back to my class reunion. How do you like me now? I'm married to a doctor. You know what I mean? It's one of those deals. So now I throw a White House economist onto the plate.
I'm sure your wife is very wonderful for a lot more important reasons than that. Let's put it this way. I have a PhD, and I probably don't look that good to you. So
no,
more important characteristics.
It's just more about having people say, well, how in the freaking heck, you know what I mean? It's like, how in the hell did he pull that off? Well, sometimes silver tongue will go.
But that your credentials behind what you're looking to do, I think stand the test of time, because experience in those fields gives you a very unique perspective.
It gives you a perspective that is useful and at the same time sometimes frustrating. At the time, going back, one of the things that attracted me to the Republican Party was that President Bush was the one who said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And of course, ouch. Nothing hurts like pain coming from inside the family, right?
Yeah.
When he went back on that pledge and agreed to not only new taxes but new spending, it was a tough moment. If you're a young conservative Republican economist, that's a
tough pill to swallow.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
By the way, I lived next door to H.W. Bush's wing commander.
Oh, how interesting! Which city?
When he was shot down in World War II.
So, I get it. When President Bush, then ensign, had been shot down.
When he got shot down, I lived next door to his wing commander. And the funny thing that I had, I forget, is it Gar? I'd have to come back on that, but Gar.
That must have been quite a moment to be able to fish a young pilot out of the water.
But to stand there and
right
and speak to this old guy. This is down in Turks and Caicos.
Yeah.
And he had a rental property there, and I got to meet him, every year at certain times of the year. And I realized when he came in, we'd sit round the table, have a couple of beers. I'm like, hang about, you were the boss as a wing commander of what is now, or what was at the time, the current president of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating to me. So
I'm certain of it.
The H.W. Bush thing brings back those memories of sitting next to a guy that he's wing commander during World War II and fished him out of the drink.
Yeah.
So,
which must have been quite a moment for everybody.
Well, it was a moment for me because I thought, man, that's dots
of history being connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he was this guy in this dusty Caribbean islands, and we sat there barefooted, drinking a couple of cold Heinekens.
Right.
And I suddenly realized.
On his Navy pension.
And he's the guy that was the boss of the future president of the United States of America.
Yeah.
That was, to me, just like, wow.
Yeah.
That was absolutely awesome.
Now, full disclosure, there are multiple rumors swinging around the local populace that Simon may very well be either CIA or former CIA.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that.
Yeah, I had heard that. Main
reason being, if you go back and listen to 90% of the episodes, you're going to find out no matter who the guest is or what their
he knows somebody connected.
There is something like we had Floyd Fest as a major festival around here for the longest time. Chris Hodges comes on the show, and he knows, Chris started Floyd Fest. He's a genius, comes on and stuff. And Simon starts talking about some South African musician that nobody else in the freaking world's ever going to know.
Right.
And Chris is like, oh, by the way, he was at my first ever festival.
Right.
He spent 3 weeks.
He's got strange connections to history, like Forrest Gump.
3 or 4 weeks on a yacht with Paul McCartney. We're talking about drinking with Phil Collins in a pub. Why was Elvis allegedly
Linda in a bikini? I get it.
It was about his access. Simon has access.
And I do appreciate the fact that Simon, while telling that story, as interesting as it was, pretended, without ever saying it, not to know George Herbert Walker Bush, which of course would have been his boss at the CIA at around that time, and probably kept up the facade with the former Navy officer who had been the wing commander, pretending that he did not know the president.
Well, just in case wing commander wanted to divulge some information, it would be
Right.
not so good for the Bush campaign. Because back then they actually cared about things like that and dignity and honor. They wanted to keep all their dirt hidden from everybody, whereas nowadays they just flaunt it like it's...
No, that's exactly right. Now, I did work for the Bush campaign.
I'm surprised y'all didn't ever cross paths
in 92. Well, probably, but he would have been in the shadows with a rifle. I just never knew it.
Sometime. Well, I guess that's in the bottom.
I'm grateful he didn't pull the trigger, although at the moment it wouldn't have bothered me.
Oh, that's where I recognize you.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for that. So, as we were saying, after the White House experience, after the White House lost, according to, of course, to Bill Clinton, I went back to work in the financial services business. I was an advocate for free markets and greater competition in financial services for many years. Had my own business. We were in the business of educating financial services executives and provided some strategic consulting services. As I said, I taught economics, 2 or 3 universities. And then 2010, I pursued my second career, which is something that I'd always had an interest in doing and almost did 20 years earlier. I went to work as a police officer in Broward County, Florida, and I was on the road for 11 years.
Broward?
Yeah.
Wow.
Very busy place.
Yes.
For a police officer, it was a very busy place.
Famous place here recently. Isn't that where the Parkland thing went on?
Yes, sir.
That's also where a lot of the election nonsense happened in the last few years as well, too.
Yes, sir.
What in the world is it with that county? I mean, to somebody who lived there, is there something magical going on there, or is this just strokes of bad luck after bad luck?
I think I believe, I'm open to being convinced otherwise, but at the moment, I believe it's strokes of bad luck. It's also a county of nearly 2 million people. So, if my math is right, that means something like, 1/170th of all the stupid shit that happens in the United States is going to happen there just because of
it's also got a very tarnished reputation with the
politics.
Well, not necessarily the politics, the Colombian cartels, and
sure,
and receiving the Colombian marching powder, which was endemic in.
Absolutely.
In the 80s, for
all
sure.
3 of those counties, Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County, were awash in snow and the money that came from it. Yeah, it was quite a time.
Well, the same thing that built Miami is I mean, you draw parallels to the same thing here of why during Prohibition we were able to stay on our feet is because the moonshine was just flowing out of the mountains just as fast as you could bottle it up. So,
which is why, of course, we used to call Broward the Appalachia of Florida.
There you go.
Because
and one of the boats I worked on, that set
was doing more than land pipe.
Well, this was a very famous boat. Funnily enough, it was called the Monkey Business. And it was the boat that
it's now famous in a documentary.
It may well be.
Mm-hmm, I believe so.
And what was the presidential candidate?
Gary Hart.
Gary Hart was caught on that boat with a hooker.
Yes.
I think there was a governor caught, and I have seen.
I don't know that she was a hooker. I don't know if I want to go quite that far.
Okay, but anyway,
it's a fine line. I honestly don't remember that part of the story. I don't remember.
But this was the boat that I captained. That got stretched, and I ended up
before or after the Gary Hart incident.
After, thankfully.
Oh, interesting.
But on the main salon, there was a.
By the way, the youngsters in your audience may need an explanation of the Gary Hart incident.
Oh, right. Gary Hart was
first of all who Gary Hart is. He had been the senator from Colorado.
He was a senator from Colorado. He was almost guaranteed on the ticket to win the presidential nomination for the GOP.
For the Democratic Party.
Oh, it was a Democratic Party.
For the Democratic Party.
Oh, right.
He was very, very popular.
Right. So he, and unfortunately, he got caught on the monkey business.
Mm-hmm. With a girl.
With
a young woman.
A young woman.
A young woman.
And that got out. But it also got out that a governor from a certain state.
And by the way, Gary Hart was also the one who said, when being accused of this situation, He said it was all rubbish. If you don't believe me, follow me. And reporters from the Miami Herald did, as I understand it, literally hid in the bushes. I've done a lot of bush hiding myself as a police officer. As a police officer, they hid in the bushes outside of his hotel and caught him with the young woman going in and out of the hotel. So anyway, back to your part of the story.
So in the main salon, there was a wonderful dining table there that was a fixed dining table where you couldn't move it. And there was a cigar burn that had been covered over and covered over not to hide it, but to protect it with layers and layers of varnish.
Right.
From a certain state governor that was using the table for leverage during a certain female
activity.
So I'm there looking at this table and I'm going, why is
it's a famous table.
Why is that burn there? And I got told the story and I thought, oh, Lord. And then I found out about Gary Hart, and that boat definitely changed the history of
the Democratic
United
Party
States and the
presidential politics.
Which election was he?
70s or 84? Early 80s.
I want to say 84.
So who'd have been going against Reagan for his second term? Then?
Bingo.
Right.
Instead of Barry Goldwater, was Goldwater 84 or 88?
Goldwater was 64.
Never mind. Who was I thinking of in 80? Goldwater got landslided, didn't he?
In 64.
Okay, who got landslided in 84? Whoever went against Reagan landslided, didn't
Mondale.
He? Okay, that's
Mondale. That was it.
I got my decades off. I was born in 82. I'm not quite as seasoned as you two gentlemen, so.
Oh, that was very polite of you, Billy, which is most
I'm really
unusual.
impressed that Simon is keeping up, having been a Londoner.
Yeah.
And 3 years my junior.
And still working on it. But that was the history of that boat. Now, the reason that the guy I work for bought the boat was for that very reason. He goes, I'm buying this boat because it changed American history. And this happened to be the former manager of the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, blah, 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 blah. My mentor, and I still think very fondly of him. So he bought the boat. It got stretched. We went over to Europe with it. And I've told this story before about the chart table. So anyone can reference back to the chart table, which was a story in itself. So he managed to get this work of art from a museum that had historical reference to the Battle of Trafalgar. Anyway, it ends up on the boat. So not only did the boat actually change the course of American history, which it did, undeniably. It also had a piece of naval British history
itself
on it.
Yeah.
For which I'm ever thankful for.
And I do wonder whatever became of the boat.
I last saw it. I left it in Italy. I believe it's in Malta. It's now called the Nortonier, or it was called...
Who owned the boat when you were on it?
I'm not obliged to say.
Who owned the boat when you were on it?
Do you understand now why we have these?
Yeah.
Have these?
He's a very private guy, and I will respect his privacy.
That's fair.
Because I hold him in high regard. But there was nothing nefarious.
No, it was just a boat to him.
It was more
with
than
history.
just a boat to him.
It was a boat with history.
It had history.
Right.
So, that was the story behind that boat. So to tie that into US history, British naval history, love it.
Yeah.
But that's how messed up.
Those were the days, as we say. Those were the days. And consider that we've gone through a lot of change about what it is that we will and will not tolerate from American politicians. It's a strange thing.
We've got even close to holding them accountable.
No. And I wish today was an environment in American politics in which the worst you could say about leaders was that they were cheating on their wives.
Yeah, if that's the worst of it, okay.
Yeah.
But we're talking about treason now.
Let me give you an example. Well, we are. Put a pin in that. Hold that thought. Because we should talk about treason in just a moment. But consider that Donald Trump of whom I'm no fan. Full disclosure, I was in New York in the 80s. I've got a long history of no good reason to have any admiration for Donald Trump. Earlier this year, he was found by a civil court in the United States to be personally liable for a sexual assault. I find that more ethically problematic than the other crap.
You're damn straight.
And yet we don't spend a lot of energy talking about that. That kind of...
How can we dismiss something of that magnitude?
I think it's because there's so much else. I also think that a lot of people didn't view it as politically important. And I think that says as much about the left as it does about the right. Because to me, I found that personally offensive. You know, we all have mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, right? The idea of a guy having committed a sexual assault, and granted, you know, as we always say in police work, I wasn't there. I didn't see it.
He paid it off.
He obviously paid it off and found a way to put it behind him. But the evidence was there in a trial that
Did
this
she put it behind her?
No, which apparently was the problem, is that he did it, she didn't, and she was not all about it. So I find that a greater character tell than waving documents around and bragging about how he's violating the law regarding classification and declassification. So anyway, to your point, we should talk about treason because the stuff that's going on these days is a little bit more brash than I think we have given it credit. I think the stuff that the Biden family has been involved with is a lot worse than most people appreciate.
I think we have a situation where, and I use these terms, I think correctly. There is a crime syndicate in the White House. In so much as its tentacles are far-reaching from the big guy.
Agreed. I would only be careful about the word syndicate because it may be merely a family, although we don't know that it's merely a family at this point. And I'd be careful about calling it the White House because I think it's mostly the family and not, government employees. As much as I dislike people that work for the White House, we don't have a way of pinning it on them yet. I mean, after all, it could have been someone else who left the cocaine in the library of the White House, right? We don't
with the candlestick.
With the candlestick. And by the way, that's an American board game.
No.
I'm really offended that you should try to culturally appropriate our board game.
I culturally appropriate everything.
I mean, you made me feel like I don't have a clue.
Oh, Cluedo. Oh, touche. Again.
Touch me again.
No, yes, indeed. This is too bloody funny. Man, I do believe I've met my match.
No.
I think so.
No.
I do believe.
No, I don't think so. No, you have no equal. You have no match.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I do believe I've been equal.
I don't know. You need to meet his wife. I think she's every bit as intelligent and probably fierce as he is, if not more. And way out of his league as far as attractiveness is concerned. But that's the case for all of us guys around here, to be honest with you.
I got lucky, mate.
We all got lucky.
Oh, we're talking about your wife.
And my wife.
I thought I was talking about mine.
Oh, mine. No. See, I place all of her.
Are we really just three losers? Is that lucky losers? Lucky winners. Lucky winners.
Winners.
Yeah. I see her down actually right now. I can peek.
Is she coming home?
Well, she's home. She's I guess her little one's asleep in the car. If we wake him up, he won't go back to sleep. So she's sitting in the seat and letting him take a nap. And I assume my daughter's downstairs watching TV.
You are going to meet Claire, the most vivacious, delightful, charming young 4-year-old you will ever meet.
Wow.
You should mention dangerous.
Dangerous.
Oh, and only increasingly so as she gets older.
Yeah, she will make you do things that you would never think that you would do in public. I mean,
and also
like many women.
Dancing like a wild man. Singing.
But to be fair, Simon, you may have done that anyway.
I'm not going to deny it. I can't. I'm sure there's video footage of me doing all those things.
She was at the restaurant. I told her this probably a year and a half ago because you say all the time, baby. I said three things you should always say to a police officer. Am I under arrest? Am I being detained? Am I free to leave? And she got it stuck in her mind. And
do you have a warrant?
They were at the Hub restaurant, which is a historic restaurant we got downtown, and a lot of the police officers would not come in. And I think as a couple of them were walking out the door, she turned around and said that to them. And the whole entire place heard it and laughed, but I think they didn't hear it. They were already out the door, but everybody else around her. I wasn't there at the moment.
Oh, that's priceless.
My wife told me I was so...
and a reminder, never, if you believe that there is any possibility whatsoever that you might be under suspicion, do not speak to the police.
And, and that's the thing about it is
take that from a cop.
We're at a position, we're at a point in time in our country where you have to actually weigh out the differences as who's it's more safer to go to. Would it be the police or would it be this stranger who's trying to kill them? And the reason I say this is because we see so many of our rights getting taken away and yanked away and mischaracterizations and just they're not police. My grandpa was a state trooper for 30 years. He was one of the first, I think was the first in Virginia to get full military and full state trooper honors at his funeral. So come from, a family that is in the business, but at the same time, I also recognize that this is not 20 or 30 years ago. There's no longer an honor code, at least like as far as the whole overall picture. Now, we're fortunate enough around here in local communities. I think we have a decent enough relationship with our sheriff's department because they're held accountable, because there is an election. You can't say the same for police because they're appointed. Their chief is appointed and they're hired on, but our deputies around here, and I'm not even railing on Rocky Mount Police because they've always been decent enough, but I'm saying the structure is different. We've been fortunate enough, but as the overall picture, you look in other cities, when it starts getting bigger, they're not patrolling their neighborhoods. They don't care. They don't care if, and they're already stressed out enough. They've got to deal with 100 different people during the day. So they start getting numb to it and they stop caring. Well, so it's an awful cycle we find ourselves in where there is blame to the police. There's also blame to the criminal element of it. They're having to deal with every single day.
The judicial system, unfortunately, doesn't support the police or the sheriff. And I've heard that again and again and again. So I'm still a big proponent of supporting the sheriff's department, the police department, certainly in my experience. But when the judicial system has a number of layers of application, they're the ones that are letting the side down because they're not supporting the sheriff's department and the police department and the application of law equally. And therein lies the problem. So we've got duality of how you apply the law, and that cannot happen. And I'm talking particularly about the Department of Justice in a number of situations with regard to January the 6th or, the riots that with Antifa and BLM. It's a duality, and you cannot stand behind one action and then back away from the other. You just can't do that. And then you can incarcerate people for 2 or 3 years without a speedy trial. Number one, that's unconstitutional. Okay? Unconstitutional. So how on earth has DC got into that position where their duality of applying legal precedent has been accepted as unconstitutional? It blows my mind.
Well, there is much that has been done by our politicians in the name of law enforcement that has not helped law enforcement.
Absolutely.
I think that's the basic commonality.
They've been given laws that they cannot enforce. And the one particular law that strikes me as unenforceable is some of the laws that have been put in place with regards to mental illness and the Second Amendment. Now, if you cannot tie a FBI check against purchasing a firearm with your medical records, where you're on God knows what jack-up happy pills, you have a mental problem. Therefore, under the law, you cannot hold a firearm. But how do you police that? How do you enforce that? So that's an unenforceable law. So that's, constitutionally, we're at loggerheads on that one element alone.
Well, we are. I don't think there is going to be a resolution there that's going to make you feel better.
No, there won't be
about
because,
it in the long run.
We're
it's my own feeling that
we're talking HIPAA laws. So I understand those two.
Well, that's right. But I don't think that there is a prospective law out there in anyone's mind. I don't think there's going to be a law in anyone's mind that is going to connect the dots from gun control to making us safer. I just don't think that that is happenable. I don't think that that's doable. I don't think that that's not going to be a thing.
It's a ghost path.
It is. It's a ghost path. I think that the way to greater safety is going to be a combination of changing our culture, changing the way that mental health is administered in this country.
Well, we medicate it. We don't treat it. You can't medicate mental health.
That's exactly right. And I also believe that...
and our police officers have to deal with that. So they're now dealing with...
Well, and I think a lot of people have to engage in the mental health process that don't today for a variety of reasons. Most of the violence that comes out of a mental health problem is not because it's being treated wrong. Most of it comes out of the fact that it's not being treated at all.
And it's being medicated with all sorts of happy pills.
Right.
You cannot medicate mental health. But if you accept mental health as medication, you have to tie that jigsaw together and say, well, unfortunately, because you're receiving that medication, because you have a mental health issue, you have to forgive your Second Amendment right to bear arms. I don't think that's unreasonable. Now, there may be some constitutional people around that swing around and say, well, everyone's allowed to bear arms. Absolutely not. I think when you have mental issues and you're on happy pills, you forgive that right. Simple as that.
We hear you. We just don't agree with you.
Well, it depends on. You really need to add some context to that, because so if somebody is perhaps maybe on like Xanax or something, like, hey, I just need a little boost to get through the day. I don't think that. But if you're a schizophrenic and you have been diagnosed as a schizophrenic and you're somebody that has collectively went off your meds,
how are you going to write that reg?
Well, no, I'm not.
How are you going to write that law?
What I'm saying is,
I
understand where they're coming from.
Or how are you going to enforce it?
But
what are you going to do about alcohol?
Best thing to do is just let everybody have a gun, and if he gets off his meds, then it'll be, we have that documentation. Like, well, he knew.
I understand. He knew. But let's be honest about what we're talking about. We're talking about something that is excruciatingly small as a proportion of the amount of violence in this country.
No, I'm not agreeing with him. I'm just playing devil's advocate on the whole side of that. I think
if we're talking about the mental health problem in gun violence, now we have a huge mental health problem in the United States, but where mental health and gun violence intersect is an vanishingly small proportion of mental health and a vanishingly small proportion of our gun violence problem. The vast majority of our gun violence problem is gangs.
I couldn't disagree with you there at all.
And it's mostly driven by the war on drugs, prosecuted by the federal government and by state governments in the United States.
And let's also add to the fact that they also do include suicides into gun violence as well.
Of course.
So you're talking
how convenient.
So those numbers do go in there as far as...
I mean, that's a touchy subject, and there's so many facets to it that there is no one pill, excuse the pun, fixes it all.
I think there is.
Gang violence.
Mm-hmm.
Attack it.
No. Stop attacking it.
What are you going to do with it?
You're going to let it go. You're going to stop the prohibition. It made Appalachia less violent.
That's an interesting thought. That's a very interesting thought.
Black markets kill.
Yes.
Black markets kill at our southern border. Black markets kill in drugs.
But now we have China, the state of China, producing fentanyl.
Why?
Flooding our southern border. Oh, absolutely. This is a political attack from the Chinese. Absolutely.
Well, it may be, but it's because people are able to make a tremendous amount of money off of it, again, because it is a market that rewards people who are willing to break the law. If you would invite people into the market who are not willing to break the law, you would have a very different market. That's
an interesting question. Somebody's in law enforcement for 12 years. Maybe you can help me understand this. Fentanyl, obviously we know it's dangerous. Also, we have our theories about where it's coming in. But anybody with just basic understanding of economics is You're not making money if your clientele base is dead. So how does this make sense? How's the whole fentanyl thing? I mean,
The reason fentanyl kills people is not merely because fentanyl is so powerful, which it is, but because we have a fraud problem. We don't have a good way of controlling it, of reporting on it, packaging. We don't have anything akin to what other industries would call branding or a trusted provider, right? It's because it is a black market. It's because we've driven this market underground. So you don't have a lot of control over the product that you are acquiring from someone. You don't really know what's in it. And that's why people die from it. It's not because they miscalculate how much something weighs that they have been sold. It's because they don't know exactly what's in what it is that they have been sold.
my point from the supplier would be, why would you want to send such sketchy stuff and have your customer base ODing and losing your cut? It's like cigarettes. They don't want to kill you right away. They want you to slowly, you know what I mean? It's like,
well, it's mostly a mistake. It's mostly just bad management. Remember, the fentanyl, because it's so powerful, it's extremely cheap per bang for your buck, right? So you can lace other products with it, but you get too much involved and you surprise someone, and that surprise is what winds up in deaths.
I heard something very recently from a law enforcement professional that was talking about some of the fentanyl overdoses that were they managed to save their lives, or whatever the situation was.
Right.
But the reaction from the user was, wow, what batch was that?
Bingo.
What batch was that? Because now we've been sensitized. We need the batch that's nearly killing people to get to our high. So now you've got a situation where you've got a drug user looking, having been sensitized to a certain strength, looking for damn close to the lethal dose.
Well, that does happen, but the other
situation.
thing, the other thing that happens is that no two batches are alike because there's no control. So, for example, in my jurisdiction, when you saw someone die from an overdose, it was extremely likely that you would see someone else in the next couple of days. The worst string I saw, we had 3 or 4, within a 4 or 5 day period.
Exactly, the batch is out there.
And it's because people didn't understand what was in it.
But now the survivors are looking for that batch because it has that increased.
Well, sometimes, but there's often this element of surprise in the sense that you don't know, what was in it. These are not abject suicides. These are mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's a very dangerous product. And because it's such a dangerous product, it requires very careful handling. To be safe, this might sound weird, but to be safe, it requires very professional handling. And for that,
There's the irony.
That's the irony. You need the kind of people who will not operate in a black market. And for this reason, when you drive it underground, you make it as dangerous as
it can be.
I'm sure that moonshine in the 1920s killed a lot more people than it does now.
Well, or not from around here, I wouldn't say, but there are other places, I guess bathtub gin and stuff people were making, in cities that couldn't get a hold of. Definitely that kind of stuff was.
I'm sure there was a lot of crappy product.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I want your audience to know I don't remember that firsthand. I just want to point that out.
That's very good.
You could get lucky and find a barn up here with some bottles still saved in there. I'm sure there's a handful of those around in these parts.
Bet they're wrong.
And the fentanyl thing's such a big part of this area, mainly because, obviously we know back in the 90s it was the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma that they specifically targeted Appalachia, this part of the country, for their rollout of OxyContin. Beth Macy wrote the big book on it, became a show.
Yep.
Phenomenal. You should really look into that. But we were specifically targeted, and now we're still feeling the effects of that, even though they've completely scaled back, which they overprescribed it, and now people who actually do need it, it's underprescribed to, and there's such an issue and problem going on. But the worst of it is you've still got all these people out here that hadn't OD'd yet that are, still fiending in Appalachia, in the coal mining towns and stuff, still stealing stuff, just trying to make it by. What are they on to now? They're on to heroin and fentanyl because they can't get the pills that were, Martinsville, just down the road here, was prescribed more oxys per person than any other place on the planet. It was around here everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
And at the time, there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't as much competition with other drugs, like in an urban area, a densely urban area like Broward County, for example.
That also counters, and I'm playing devil's advocate, so forgive me, but that also counters your argument about regulating it, which it was regulated by the pharmaceutical industry, to the detriment of the populace.
Mm-hmm.
Martinsville being one, Coal Country being another. So that kind of counters that argument. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this.
Well, to counter the counter, I think that what would happen if you made it completely illegal to touch myself, to make it completely illegal would have made it even more dangerous.
Absolutely.
And by the way, none of this is to say that we don't have a huge problem in the United States, because we do. It's just an absolute mountain of death. Is absolutely a mountain of death, and something that we have to get after. When I say you need to let it go, what I certainly don't mean put your head in the sand and pretend like that there is not a problem. What I mean is that we need to treat a medical problem as a medical problem, and that we need to bring the usage of these products out into the light.
Yeah, I mean, there are.
I'd agree with that.
There have been studies, and there have been different practices applied in some places. The Fresh Needle program, and giving people a spot and a place to do it at. That way, they're controlled. I mean, so you start getting into the moral aspects of it. Was it well, so that's a whole different argument. Should you encourage it by giving them these spaces, or that's a whole something other different.
Sure. I'm not sure I would subsidize it. I'm just saying don't make it illegal.
I don't think that worked very well in Berlin. I'm just saying.
Safe spots.
With dispensing needles and products to satisfy the crave. Again, is it the chicken or the egg? I don't know. I want to come back to another element, because you can go down that drug road and proliferation of drug use, and just the desperation that it causes. Well, I think we're all very well aware of the risks that you're taking when you're messing with this stuff, and God forbid that our kids have to confront this. But this is what we have to consider as parents,
right?
That our kids are subject to this, and we have to be very cautious about it.
And to your point, there is a difference between the government letting it go and you letting it go as a father. Right?
Yeah, very much so.
If you're one of my kids and you try it, you'll find out real fast it's a lot worse than illegal.
Oh, you're darn straight.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued about how your nomination as a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party is going. Because I like you said, we've already discussed that I think that this is the time that a third party can impact this election, and I firmly believe it. I pray that it happens. How is the Libertarian Party going to break this two-party system when both parties swing round and say, and we've said this before with Spike, if I vote for Libertarian, I'm giving my vote to
a Libertarian.
Well, the Democrats. Or I'm giving my vote to the Republicans.
Exactly.
And they're both coming up with the same argument. I would like to see a genuine third party.
Right.
And the time is ripe. The country needs an alternative to what we have now.
Yeah, no question about it.
How do we do that? How do you do that?
Yeah. A while ago, I said that a big reason that I personally am into this race is because we have such an opportunity, but we have to do certain things differently. The kind of campaign that I am running is fundamentally and profoundly different from the style of campaigning that we have engaged in the Libertarian Party in the past, and it's for a couple different reasons.
That's refreshing to hear already.
Well,
because it didn't work last time.
It didn't. It did not work last time, or the time before that, or the time before that. And there are some commonalities to what it is that we did wrong during those times. And I should caution to rapidly add that none of this is personal. The individuals that were involved in those campaigns, I have every respect for.
Oh, absolutely.
But
It's
there
just strategy.
were strategic, in retrospect, mistakes made that perhaps were difficult to recognize at the time. And, you know, a lot of us didn't see eye to eye at that time, but now we all agree. We should agree. It's still not the case that we all do, but it is absolutely clear to me in retrospect, as it was to most of us at the time, that to play a major role in American politics, it means you have to offer not just a third choice, but a choice that is extremely differentiated from the other parties. That it has to be something that is recognizably, absolutely, irreversibly different from the two-party system. That means, number one, it has to be different from both parties. It can't be a little bit more like one party than it can't feel like something that aligns with Republicans, or it can't feel like something that aligns with Democrats. You have to be able to tell the truth, which is that for most Americans...
That's something, by the way, that's been lacking in U.S. politics.
A little bit.
Global politics.
A little bit.
For a long time.
Yeah, a little bit. You have to be able to tell the truth that your government, irrespective of who has been in charge of it, your federal government has not been operating in your interest and has not been operating in your interest for a long, long time.
Agreed.
This is true in foreign policy. It's true with regard to military intervention, but it's also true in terms of trade policy. It is absolutely true in terms of blowing up a pipeline at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, which we now know from Cy Hirsch's reporting the United States government played a major role in, which is, I think, really despicable.
A pipeline, by the way, that I was involved in laying.
That's what I understand. And
you were laying pipe.
Yeah, he was laying pipe. And I further understand that it was working, notwithstanding your involvement, which is fantastic. And it makes it a real shame that it was blown up. And
it was a shocker.
And I happen to know that you were not there that day.
Thankfully.
Right.
You really know?
Well, we had to look into it. He's been posting photographs with, artificially imprinted dates and locations for that moment when it blew up, so that he would have a plausible excuse.
I did know the route and exact GPS coordinates of where the pipeline was.
By the way, not only is he a sea captain who could actually make it out there, he also is a deep sea diver as well. So
and who better to know exactly where and how? And
the person who laid it down, the person who get there,
the timing of other ships' routes. I mean, you would have all of the information, and with that accent, he would, of course, be able to deny any involvement with the federal government of the United States. It's almost authoritarian malpractice not to hire Simon to do it.
James Bond, shaken, not stirred, mate.
And that's what happened to the oil. It got shaken, not stirred. I think the American public is waking up to the idea that the federal government of the United States does not operate in our interest. It does not operate in our interest in a financial sense. If you look at inflation or debt, it does not operate in our interest in terms of our ethics. When you look at, and by ethics, I don't mean merely the financial components, about which it is totally true, or our foreign policy, about which it is absolutely true. But I believe it is also true that wherever you are in terms of the culture wars, that the engagement in the culture wars between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is not in your interest.
Absolutely not.
It is absolutely not in your interest. I think that you are poorly, if you are a social conservative, you are poorly represented by the behaviors of the Republican Party. And if you are a social liberal, you are terribly represented by the Democratic Party. These are parties that make it their point not to resolve anything in a useful fashion, to exaggerate the position of the most fringe elements of their constituents, and to do so in a way that I feel offends the basic ethics and values of mainstream America. Mainstream America wants to be left alone.
Yeah, Main Street America specifically.
Main Street America wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something now. That is a profound statement. What you've just said is profound. And we all need to be listening to that. Because if we let apathy dictate the outcome of 2024, we are looking to repeat the same.
And worse, to your earlier point about our movement toward totalitarianism, I think that it's moving in the wrong direction, and I fear it could even be accelerating. And to your point, we could be on the cusp of something truly ugly.
Yeah.
And I think that the Libertarian Party, libertarianism with a lowercase l, which of course has to be explained to people, represents an off-ramp to a certain amount of authoritarianism, possibly without the seismic schism that I believe is probably coming. We do need a revolution, and what I am offering
in thought, a revolution in thought.
What I'm offering is a revolution in thought, is a revolution in governance, is a revolution in interpreting the Constitution. We need to fight our way back to the Constitution, which is where most Americans want to be. Remember that as libertarians, we are the philosophical descendants of the people that put together this nation, and did so not for the explicit purpose of pissing off the British, although that was a highly advantaged byproduct. But really,
I don't take it personally. It's okay.
But really, for only one legitimate purpose, and that is to protect your individual liberty. In those days, it was largely in the context of things like religion and taxation and quartering redcoats and things like that. But it was set up to protect your individual liberty legitimately, and that was it. And I think that most Americans they would not characterize it as such. They would not call it this, but most Americans have a libertarian streak. Most Americans believe in the way that we viewed the Constitution a generation ago, whereas today we live in a post-constitutional nation.
That should be alarming to anyone that's listening. We should not be in a post-constitutional era. That disturbs me immensely for the direction that the country is going. And to present a libertarian perspective on that should give us all hope. I hope that that's what it does, because if we think the two-party system is our solution,
then we think wrong.
We're done.
We're done.
We're done.
If you're waiting for a Republican to fight back toward the Constitution, to lead that charge, you're waiting for something that's not going to happen. If you're waiting for a Republican, for example, to correct our foreign policy, that is certainly not going to happen. If you're waiting for a Democrat to stand up for your First Amendment rights, your Second Amendment rights, your Fourth Amendment right,
any constitutional rights, at the end of the day,
very few politicians can spell the 10th Amendment.
Well, every time they go into office, cheeky, I like it. When you consider that they are sworn on oath to uphold the Constitution with their hand on the Bible or whatever it may be, they choose to make their oath on. So I'll be that diverse.
Good for you. Good for you. We knew you had it in you.
I mean, that was a stretch. But if you think that you're that diverse, and within probably 12 hours, they are breaking that oath. Every one of them. Every one of them.
Well, they've already broke it before they even said it. They bought and paid for before they even...
Where I'm going with that, as far as libertarians are concerned, is is trying to validate the third party vote. And I'm not saying independent.
No,
that's not what I'm looking for.
No, not independent. What you want is a party that represents the idea that the government is here to protect your individual liberty and that's it, that represents what America is supposed to be when it's at its best, what America is all about. We are a pro-immigration nation. We are a tolerant nation. We are not a racist nation. We are a nation that believes in independence and entrepreneurialism. We are not
freedom of thought,
freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of science, bodily autonomy,
freedom of speech.
The simple dignity of being able to educate your children the way that you choose has been taken from you if you live in the United States and can't afford to send your kids to a private school. I find that somewhere between frightening and disgusting.
I'm not going to disagree with a word of that. I fully support that. How do you, as a potentially the president of the Libertarian Party, give us the opportunity to legitimately vote with our hands on heart with a legitimate libertarian representative in our area to say you're not taking the vote away from a Democrat or you're not taking the vote away from a Republican? I want you to, because those two clowns, those two clown shows are going to tell you, oh, you're going to give the vote to the Democrats. Oh, you're going to give the vote to the Republicans. By the way, I don't like calling Democrats anymore. They're progressives. All right, the Democratic Party, in my opinion, has been taken over as an insurgency by the progressive movement. Now, whether you call them socialists, Marxists, communists, whatever, the true Democrat, I could have a conversation with the true Democrat across the table, have a compromise, we can have a discussion, and everything is hunky-dory, and we would come to not necessarily a loggerhead, but we could come to an agreement. With a progressive, you can't do that.
No, you can't. And I would suggest that not only are you correct about that, but you're doubly correct in the sense that the Republican Party should really no longer be called Republican. In no real sense does that party represent
the conservative American. Absolutely,
the conservative American.
I agree.
Or in a representative sense, a government that is going to reflect the values of conservative Americans, either socially conservative or fiscally conservative or conservative in the context of foreign policy. It's not true. It is no longer aligned with the basic underlying values of Americans. And I think that that's ultimately why Donald Trump has become popular, because people have become frustrated with everything that you just correctly said about the progressive half of our two-party system.
But I'm not saying the Republicans are right either.
No.
Far from.
No. My point is that Donald Trump does not represent the interests of conservatives, but he does represent a backlash to the Obama years, to the Biden style of policy, of the woke side of the culture wars, to the overall notion that there are elites in this country who are better positioned to make decisions for you than you are yourself. I think that people are frustrated with that at a very, very visceral level that they may even find difficult to articulate. But there is a feeling that there are a lot of people in this country who think they're a lot smarter than you are.
Well, the intellectual superiority has always been one of the things that I clamor against, because when you pose that arrogance, you've completely shut off the element of the population that you're looking to represent. Now, and as a constitutional republic, we are not, I will say this again, we are not a democratic republic. We're a constitutional republic, and our constitutionally elected representative should be representing the wishes of the people. We, the people. So how and clearly, and I use quotations, the Democratic Party, because they no longer exist, the Republican Party,
the Trump Party,
who I'm really struggling with,
right?
How can you as a libertarian give us this option to go back to
stop wasting your vote?
Yeah.
Stop wasting your vote.
Well,
vote for your ethics, vote for your values, vote for your principles, vote for your family, vote for your future, vote for yourself. If you vote for one of those other parties, you've already admitted to me that you don't care about voting for values and ethics.
Exactly.
Or principles. What you're saying is that you believe in the status quo, that you believe in the two-party system, that you like the way that the government is going, and that you're okay with it being volleyed back and forth as though over a tennis net between the two parties, that you don't recognize that both of these parties have an interest in advancing authoritarianism, albeit in slightly different flavors, but both parties represent an expansionist government in scale and in scope. And if you're okay with that, then you can go ahead and vote for the duopoly. But if you're not okay with that, then you need to vote as such. You need to stop wasting your vote.
So how can me as a simple guy,
And we emphasize.
oh, very simple. My name is
Simple.
Simon. Oh, indeed.
I think that we need to emphasize that he's a guy, not just a simple guy.
Oh, yeah, roger that. So how can we, because the representation of libertarianism needs to become expansive.
Mm-hmm.
How can you, as a nominee for a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, how can you get folks to put themselves forward as representatives in a voting structure that allows us to make that vote, because we're tied with a two-party system, and that to me is the game-changing winner of how we do this.
You need to define yourself without reference to the other parties. You need to do exactly the opposite of what the Libertarian Party did in 2016 and 2012. In those days, Gary Johnson, very nice guy, went around saying, I'm fiscally conservative like a Republican and social liberal like a Democrat. And the problem with that statement is twofold. Number one, it's a lie.
Absolutely.
Number two, and we all, because of what we just discussed, we all know what that means. And number two, it's not just a lie, but it's a violation of Marketing 101. You do not define yourself in the context of your opposition. You define yourself in the context in which you operate yourself, in the context you want your product to be seen, your service to be delivered. And for us, that means we're here to protect your liberty. We're here to protect you. We're here to protect your rights. And by the way, your right to pursue your own values, your right to live your life by your own standards. We're not here to tell you we're okay with your lifestyle or we're not okay with your lifestyle. What we're here to tell you is we're okay protecting you from the government having an opinion. Don't ask me my opinion of your lifestyle. You shouldn't have to. You shouldn't care. Parenthetically, I was raised by a Lutheran and a Calvinist. You don't want to know how my family feels about your lifestyle, because they will tell you, and it is not an answer that anybody wants to hear. And that has to be completely irrelevant. You do not want some other schmuck's values determining the government's attitude toward your lifestyle.
The moral code that we all live under, and I would like to think that we need to adopt, the Big Ten. The Big Ten being the 10 Commandments. If we're following those, we're in a good place. So I don't want necessarily any entity to tell me how I should be feeling or thinking. So I absolutely am 100%.
We don't want the government to criticize it or support it or subsidize it or penalize it or regulate it or criminalize it. I don't want the government to express a fucking opinion about my lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yeah. Somebody else besides Simon dropped the first F-bomb.
That's, it's very unusual for me in a political conversation not to drop multiple F-bombs, because
I apologize to your audience.
No.
Please,
We'll bleep that out later.
trust me.
No, we won't.
I'm the first one to be dropping those when I get emotional.
Well, even that one I blame on you for getting me riled up. It was still your fault.
Emphasize it, yes. I mean, I think we have a unique opportunity right here, and I'll kind of lead you down this direction a little bit, maybe talking more specifically about the Libertarian Party, because as somebody who I've been libertarian mindset for quite some time, really started getting involved in the party side of it a couple years ago. And I'm no much further than somebody who donates a little bit each month, I believe, and I pay attention and I try and keep up with the people who are making sense. Now, when it comes to Libertarian Party politics, I have learned that most of the people that are involved all have really good ideas and are very genuine. So what I really do is, instead of finding a team to root for, I usually just do the process of elimination. I just eliminate people that absolutely just find something I'm not going to, so there's more on the table. I think in 2020, the Libertarian Party absolutely shit the bed. I think there was a golden opportunity right there to really get the message out there, to really get some talking points on the stage, to really get them
in the context of COVID.
in the context of everything. It was that golden opportunity, and we completely missed out. So Libertarian Party goes through this major shift over the past couple of years, where a lot of the Mises Caucus people have taken over, and there was a lot of energy, there was a lot of enthusiasm. I was one of those people. I donated to the Mises Caucus, but I still very much support all the rest of them. I'm not somebody who really gets baffled up, but here we almost, a year or two after all that stuff, and I'm not seeing the momentum that I thought I would be seeing. And this is no disrespect to you, because I think how many people have officially came out as they're going to be running? It's you, Chase Oliver, Joshua Smith, and who's Jacob Hornberger. Okay, so I mean, there's a lot of excitement coming out of the last year. I mean, and apparently right now the Libertarian Party is not really interested in trying to get Spike on board. I think Dave Smith, Justin Amash, and that's not a disrespect to y'all. I think having those on board makes the pool that much better. It allows some of your ideas to also, because for better or worse, those guys have reached to the Joe Rogan show. They have reached to Tim Cass. There are people from those shows that are tuning in. Why, for nothing else, let's get them on stages with you all and have these ideas boffled around, so more of the libertarians out there that are running can get their. I don't know. It's kind of frustrating. Then I start seeing, the Liberty Party in New Hampshire is starting to, there's a lot of things going on between their in and outs, and they're arguing about freaking numbers right now off of Robert F. Kennedy. You know what I'm talking about? This kind of stuff. Like the more and more I look at it, the more and more I kind of almost want to pull myself back from the party. I mean, I like what Spike is doing. I like where he's going, but I also respect what people like you all are doing. So I want to find the way, because I feel like the thing that frustrates me the most is I feel like libertarians, they've got their pickaxe and they're in the mine, and they're constantly digging down, looking for something. And all they have to do instead of going down, is go forward, and just a few feet on the other side of that wall is just massive opportunity. When I say that, I'm talking about rural America. I think there are more libertarians right here in the mountains in middle America, but the problem is most of your libertarian leadership, most of the people in the party politics side, they live in urban areas. They have an urban mindset. They have urban ideals. They don't know how to reach or get out to the rural population. I think the rural population is, I'm tired of the bullshit. Well, that's a libertarian. But they don't know that these options are out here, because all they know is, well, hell, at least Donald Trump tells these people to piss off, so that's what I'm going to vote for. I think we're so close.
I think you're right.
I think we're so close to just reaching it. That's your base, right? Your base is these mountain folk. Your base is people in middle America, Kansas, Montana, Idaho. I mean, that's where libertarian, but unfortunately we have this barrier right here where not enough rural people are getting involved on the political side of things, and too many urban people can't relate to I mean, you're right there. We're right there.
I'm seeing a national crisis where we don't have a libertarian option as an alternative to the two-party system.
We have not up until now.
And I'm hoping you.
And that's because in 2020, 2016, and 2012, we did not run a libertarian campaign. We ran Republican light, Democrat light. We ran an unimaginative, uncreative, and unbold campaign.
Right.
I think that there are certain things that we need to do different tactically and different strategically. Tactically, one of the things that we need to do differently than we have in the past is we need to spend money fast and loud, as opposed to slow.
Now is the time.
Now is the time. As soon as we turn now, in terms of presidential politics, our cycle starts very late. Unfortunately, it's something that we have done wrong, and hopefully it'll be done better 3 years from now. But we will not have the nomination behind us until the end of May, which is a very late place to start. But as soon as we start raising money, we need to be able to spend that on really edgy advertising that differentiates us from the other parties. That has to be done right away. There is no extra. There is no mitigating the disaster if you flame out late instead of early. If you're gonna be a loser, if you're gonna flame out, you might as well do it fast and brash, because the only way to win, the only way to score whatever you define as victory, is to differentiate yourself right away and to announce loud and brash that there is a new sheriff in town. There is a new option that is completely different from the other options.
The libertarian movement, by the way, is that option.
We should be about the messaging. You're absolutely right about that. The message. I mean, and if for nothing else, like I mean, I think most libertarians understand, look, getting on that national stage and taking a victory is almost impossible. Mainly because they are there to prevent you from doing so.
But almost.
No, it isn't.
But almost. Not fully. Let's go there. Because I want to go there in a couple different contexts. One is the American public is not going to pay any attention to you if they believe that the chances of you becoming president are zero. In that sense, I believe that it is absolutely objectively incorrect to say that we should be running a candidate without credentials. Because if you run a candidate, as we have in the past, without credentials, then the American public looks at that individual and says, there is just no way that she can make it to the White House. And for that reason, I don't have any reason to pay any attention, because the American public thinks that this is a competition. This is not merely everyone gets on a soapbox and shares their philosophy. This is literally a competition for the White House. And so if there's some other reason why you can't make it, then why should I care about your philosophy? If I was interested in philosophy, I would have read a book last week. The reason I'm paying attention to this, if I'm an American voter, is because I want to figure out who to vote for, who might become president. And if you don't have the background, then you're just not in it. You're just not interesting. And so in that sense, I think that the campaign that I am prosecuting is at an advantage because I've had not one but two careers in public policy and public service. And whereas a libertarian might not think that that's important, people outside of the Libertarian Party do. I'm not even saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just recognizing that it is an is
thing. You've got to know the game.
You've got to know the game, and you've got to have the bat to hit the ball.
Yep.
And so in that sense, our campaign has that. Now, there's another element to that that's important, which is that we're out there with the most transformational ideas. School choice, the idea of allowing states unilateral nullification, the allowing states to opt out of federal supremacy.
States' rights.
States' rights. The idea of ending the IRS, the idea of sunsetting the FBI, breaking up the FBI, I should say, the idea of replacing the Federal Reserve System with a rules-based monetary policy. The most transformational ideas. Now, if you're going out there with cold peas, if you're going out there with something mild, your background and credibility is only mildly important. However, if you're out there saying, end the Fed, you damn well better be an economist.
Oh, yeah. A very educated, accomplished, with track record economist.
If you're exactly, I've met with the Federal Reserve Board. I've met with the Fed in the boardroom itself. I've had my research publicly cited by the Fed chairman. I've worked with Fed economists for dozens of years, and I have every respect for them. But with all due respect, they got to go because they have proven over the past 100 years, not all of which have I been tracking personally, but over the past 100 years, they have proven that notwithstanding great efforts and great energy and great resources, they simply cannot live up to the mandate that we have given it. And we need to replace their discretionary policy with a rules-based system. But having said that, similarly, if you talk to me about ending the FBI, if you talk to me about restructuring criminal justice, whether that's ending the war on drugs or changing the way that we manage police officers, you damn well have been in the business.
Right.
Because credibility is going to matter. If you're out there with the most transformational ideas, credibility matters double. And if you're not out there with the most transformational ideas, you're not going to be sufficiently differentiated from the other parties, and you're not going to win for that reason. So I think that this all ties together in a way that is absolutely critical. The other thing that I want to mention is you mentioned that it's unlikely that a libertarian is going to win. Let me counter that with a few years ago, you would have said it's really unlikely that a guy like Donald Trump would win. And by that, I mean,
touche.
That's at that time, it was unlikely. Now consider everything that you thought about Donald Trump a number of years ago and how strange it would be if that guy became president of the United States. Consider this. He's proven that he's not going to take on international trade. He's not going to pull back our foreign bases. He's not going to be an anti-war guy, right? In the sense that the American public really demands. He's not a free trader. And he's been under a number of indictments, which we see what happens when he doesn't get his way. He acts like a small child, and not in a good context. He acts like
not very statesman-like.
He acts like a crappy little child. And by the way, as you and I were discussing earlier, he's a guy that we recently found out is responsible for a sexual assault some years ago. Okay, so that guy becoming president of the United States a second time, that's a weird thing. Now, again, the youngsters in the audience are going to have to take my word for this. When Joe Biden was 40, he was not smart, he was not ethical, he was not principled. That guy becoming president of the United States is weird. That guy becoming president of the United States after having screwed up our economy, after having proven that he can't walk from point A to point B, after he has proven that he has gone senile, that guy becoming reelected, that's a weird thing.
That's scary.
That's a scary, weird thing. So don't talk to me about it would be weird for a libertarian.
We need a libertarian to be contended in the presidential race.
Yeah,
That's
no,
right.
I don't think it would be weird for a libertarian to be there. I just look at the deep state, I guess is the best way I can put it, is not allowing that to happen.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Let's look at it another way. How many folks allegedly voted in the last election? Total.
Probably half the country.
Half the country.
So you got to.
So we've got half the country that allegedly had 80 million votes for
each
Sleeping Joe and contentious Donald.
And you got another 80 that didn't vote.
That sat in the dark, that didn't vote for whatever reason. How can the libertarians engage with the folks that didn't vote? Because that's where I see the market trend. You're not going to change.
Piece.
It's a huge piece. Guess what? It's a winning piece.
It is a winning piece. It's a big piece, and it's a piece that aligns with the idea that that is going to favor a message that recognizes the reason you don't vote is because you've been frustrated. You don't believe in the system. You recognize that the system is against you. By the way, that doesn't make you paranoid. That makes you insightful.
It also gives you the tag of apathy.
It gives you the tag of apathy.
I would like to...
Because the truth is not that you don't care. The truth is that you're pissed.
Yeah.
And you should be pissed.
Yeah.
And I'm pissed too.
You can't do shit all about it.
And the only difference between you being pissed and me being pissed is I'm the asshole out here saying it.
Right. So how do we engage?
But we're on the same team. If you're pissed off, we're on the same team. Right. If you like the way things are going, then you can either not vote.
Engaging the non-voter
might
actually be the cure, because...
And disaffected Republicans and disaffected Democrats.
All the disaffected guys that are claiming to be independent, blah, blah, blah.
Now, think about how many people that is, and think about the following.
Massive.
Now, think about the following. We're not going after 100%.
How could you?
We're not going after 50%. Remember that in a three-way race, 37 wins. 37 wins. I recognize that 33.4 could win, but 37 does win.
But then you contend with the Electoral College element, and that's the one.
In the House of Representatives, you're going to get screwed.
That's going to be a problem. So here comes another thought on that electoral thing and representation and having people that we can vote for within our area, because it seems to me. And we've all respected and thought that we can affect local politics, and that really is the basis of how we can progress politically, because we believe that if we affect local politics, that's the only impact that we can have, because we can't really impact what happens in Richmond. We certainly can't impact what happens in DC. I mean, what is going on there? That's another matter for another whole entire show.
Agreed.
So when we're talking about impacting local politics, there's a layer of there's a layer of control that I'm now aware of, and I'm just only just now connecting the dots, in that we have that I'm aware of from the GOP perspective, that we have a Republican Party chairman locally that then presents suitable candidates for representation at the local level, whether that's in the school board, which should be apolitical. Please, why is that? That should not be a political body. We're talking about board of supervisors. That the
Town council.
well, the town council is a lesser body to the board of supervisors, where you have an underlying administration that says these are the candidates that we can put forward, and you have to then go through that selection criteria,
which is frequently problematic. You don't always get the best, best and brightest that way, right?
Very, very problematic. And these folks, whether they are the chairman of the GOP, Franklin County, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another tier that you've got to overcome as and I hate using the term, the third party candidate, but we have to establish how we can be represented by a third party on that tier of representation. And that's what I'm not seeing. So how on earth can me, as a simpleton in Callaway, Virginia, in Franklin County, who's looking to affect local politics, because that is the way that we can make change, where is that infrastructure that allows that to happen? Because you're already facing that two-party system with their money pot, their manipulation.
And the rules that govern ballot access are stifling.
Yes. And that, to me, we have to overcome. And I don't know how we do that. And this is my first time it's hit me, as we don't have representation at that level to be able to encounter or defeat the
No, it's very difficult. The short answer, the beginning of the long answer, is that you need to get involved with the Libertarian Party and fight for ballot access. The more candidates that run on the Libertarian ticket, the better off that we will be, and the more of a fighting chance we will have in the future of ballot access propagating from one cycle to the next, given the rules are very challenging.
But is not the ballot access made very easy? Because it seems, from a local perspective, you can put yourself forward as an independent. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. That appears to be the way to do it. But the independent is not what I'm looking for.
No. You have to run as a libertarian. And you yourself, for example, you should run as a libertarian. And you should back your local libertarian candidates. We need more individuals to run as libertarians. Now, having said that, part of the reason it's so challenging to run, I ran for Congress when I was in Florida. I've only lived in Virginia the past 18 months. When I was in Broward County, I ran for Congress. And one of the things that I learned, of course, is that you have to spend much of your time, half of your time, explaining to people what libertarianism is, what a libertarian is, and what it's all about, and why you should support it, and why your ethics align with that. And you learn that the value of the Libertarian Party brand is virtually zero. In some cases, it could even be negative. Especially,
and that's gut-wrenching. To me, that's gut-wrenching. It's
gut-wrenching, and even in some places, it's negative in the sense that there's a misalignment of reality with the Libertarian Party brand. And I believe that a big reason for that is what we were talking about earlier, that the national campaigns, the presidential campaigns of 12, 16, and 20 didn't do very much to differentiate the party from the other parties, didn't do very much to clarify in people's minds what libertarianism is, why the party aligns with your values, because
it put them
as Billy said, we missed the opportunity to talk about it in the COVID context.
Well, it put them as another independent.
That's right. If you're not out there leading with principles,
Horrible.
You might as well be independent.
Horrible.
Gary Johnson's whole campaign was, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but I'm like them.
No.
And that's
differentiate. I am
exactly
got nothing to do with
exactly.
either of these two clown elements.
And I'm also against what it is that they have together created. And I am also against what it is that will continue to be created and will be propagated and advanced. I'm against the totalitarianism that these two idiots are, in effect, agreeing, even if their eyes are closed and they don't realize it, to create and to propagate. And for that reason, don't waste your vote. You need to vote against that system and that result. And that branding has to take place at the national level where it's most effective and most efficient. It is actually, in my view, not true. It is historically not true that political movements can successfully be launched and branded and become successful from the ground up. You have to have an air campaign. You have to have a national campaign. You have to have national leadership. You have to have a differentiated message from the get-go. Yes, grassroots matters. Grassroots is required for success, but the two have to be there together. There is just no way to do it at the grassroots level without that air campaign, and that's what I'm here to provide.
So here's something just to throw a wrench in the works. That I'm so good at. Sorry. In the UK, and I hate doing this. God, I hate this. Because I haven't lived there in decades. But when you are the losing party, you are a shadow government. And your leader is established and he's building up for the next,
ready to take power,
and
everyone knows what that represents.
Exactly. We do not have that here.
No, we don't.
And that to me baffles me as to why we don't.
We don't even have it for the major party out of power. Exactly. Much less independent, much less libertarian party.
To say that there's a shadow government, it doesn't undermine the existing government, but there's a checks and balance involved in having a shadow government, because they still hold the current government to task.
In a much more effective way than merely saying no, or much more effective way than just saying you're stupid.
Well, which is why we're in this position of divisiveness now.
Exactly.
That is so horrendous.
Because instead of providing a choice, we just provide
rhetoric
that attempts to undermine the other side.
Right. So to me,
this is where authoritarianism comes from.
And we're in very, very dangerous ground if we don't look, and I don't want to say look to Europe to say what succeeded. I mean, Europe is an absolute disaster right now, because of the European Union, the euro, the Brits saying "screw you, I don't want any part of it." They never joined the European Union.
The monetary union.
The monetary union.
And good for them.
And rightly so. As it will turn out. But
everyone who is criticizing the United Kingdom from pulling out the Brexit from the European Union are failing to give sufficient recognition and credit for never having joined the monetary union.
Well, the sovereignty of the UK was at stake.
It absolutely was, and I believe in the fullness of time, which we have not reached yet by an order of magnitude, in the fullness of time, people will look back and say that Brexit was the smartest political move of the century.
I'm 100% behind that. So to say that we don't have a shadow cabinet, if you will, and a shadow leader from the party of the opposition. Now, the UK does have three parties. Arguably, there are only two. But to say that we don't have a leader of the opposition baffles me. It baffles me because there is no pushback from the shadow party to the party that's currently in power. There's no pushback at all, other than someone saying, well, I don't agree with that. Then it becomes an individualist.
Well, and then they'll write you a strongly
rejection of
worded letter
policy.
as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, I mean, that
Yes, that is part and parcel of the problem with the duopoly, is that they are merely against each other instead of standing up for any sort of agenda.
and it aids to divisiveness, which is the most divisive I have ever seen.
Absolutely, absolutely, and leading toward totalitarianism as a result, because it's what breeds this fear of the other side and the calls for greater power that I need to protect you from that other idiot. That's where it all comes from. On the libertarian front, I believe that we don't have the organization that we will someday in the future, that we have not had up until now, the organization that we need to develop a shadow responsiveness, if not a shadow government full-fledged, is because we suffer from sort of a losing mentality. The idea that we can't play a role. We're all mad at each other. We're all frustrated with each other.
You're obligated to take a role.
We're obligated to take a role.
This is our constitutional right to take a role.
I say every day, this is not merely an opportunity for us in 2024. As the descendants of the individuals, philosophically speaking, who put together the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in our government, it is not merely an opportunity, it is an obligation, because no one else is going to lead the charge back to the Constitution. If the Libertarian Party does not play a role in politics in 2024, it will merely accelerate the demise of the federal government of the United States in a fiscal sense, as well as an ethical sense. And my greatest fear is not that will happen by the end of the century, because I believe that it probably will. My greatest fear is that by the time that happens, people like you and I won't care, because by then we will all recognize that there is no hope any longer for the government of the United States, either at the state level or the federal level, to add any value to anyone's lives whatsoever, and we might as well hit the reset button.
It is our constitutional obligation to remain engaged and vote. That is a constitutional obligation. And when you choose not to, I've got real problems with that.
I think you're letting yourself down. I think you're letting your government down. You're letting your Constitution down. But
you're letting your community down.
Most importantly, you're letting your community down. I believe that as libertarians, we need to recognize that when we say that we're standing up for your rights, that we're representing the firewall against the government encroaching on the rights of people that we call brothers and sisters for no other reason than the fact that they are fellow Americans. The people that are least able to put up a fight against the government, the people that are least able to tolerate the perversions in our economic system, the people that are least able to stand up against the societal malfunctions that our government imposes in trying to do right by you, but screwing up how families work, how societies work, how markets work. The government's creation of black markets hurts most the people who can least afford for these damages to be visited upon them and their families and their lives.
Beautifully put. And that's corporate greed.
It's absolutely
in a nutshell.
Corporate greed in a nutshell. And whether you call that corporate greed in a corporate sense or in a government sense, it's all the same.
Wow.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop, because I know we've got I know you got to be somewhere, Mike. I know you got to be in Chicago. You want to come and get back on the road. I honestly can't thank you enough for coming in here and giving us some of your time. I want people out here to engage in these ideas. I want them to think outside the box, and that box is what you've normally been accustomed to thinking is either LR, 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 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Think about going outside that box a little bit.
Don't be binary.
No, listen to some of these ideas these guys have out here.
Oh, what a concept. There's a T-shirt. Don't be binary.
Look, we have the ability, and regardless of what happens, in the end, we still need to find ways to be able to come together, because even if the shit falls, as long as we have a community around here, we're going to come up through the other side a little bit better than most people. So you always got to be planning for multiple instances in advance, but educating yourself is probably the first route you can take. And I know a lot of people on here, we have a lot of people that are involved in the Libertarian Party going to be listening. A lot of people that are just normal listeners are going to be listening to this show. And I just want them to take away from this is you have a whole lot more power than you really understand. You have a lot of power through your dollar. You have a lot of power through your voice. You have a lot of power through your cell phone by just calling people and harassing them. You know what I mean? Just don't sulk and don't think that you can't change things, because as you alluded to earlier, it's disingenuous to think that we can't do it on a national level because Donald Trump did it, and that's a third party candidate. I think we have to figure out a way to continue to get the message out there. And that's one thing what I like about you. I think you're articulate. I think you're very, very knowledgeable in the things you're saying as well. And like we were talking to Simon here at the break.
For fuck's sake, we got a White House Economist here.
Yeah, most politicians just aren't going to be genuine. They're not. They're going to come. They're going to give you, predetermined answers if they would have thought in their head hundreds and hundreds of times. Very few times,
because they're fucking attorneys.
Are they going to come in here like you did? Spike did a good job of it as well. Granted, that was post his, but I guess you could still kind of consider him a politician in some sense. Same with you. We've had other politicians, just local guys around here that refuse to even come on the show and put their name on it. It's like, well, if you're not going to come put your name on it, stand behind something, then why should we believe in you? So we certainly appreciate your time for swinging by here on the way to Chicago. Simon, is there anything else you can think of?
I'm blown away with your articulate perception of where we should be going. And if anyone doesn't grasp that, I don't know how to help you. I really don't, because if we don't figure out a way to make this change, we're going to repeat history. And let me tell you, history is a very ugly place to be if we choose that path.
Very much so.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm gratified to be in your podcast and honored by your invitation.
We have certainly enjoyed it. We've had a great time. I know, Simon, you've knocked his socks off, which is something I enjoy seeing. Is there where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and your campaign, social media, things of that nature?
I appreciate you asking. They can't. We actually have no social media. We have no websites. We have no contact information. We don't use telephones. It's just you can't. It's absolutely impossible.
Well, you sound like us in the beginning.
Yeah.
So we're on the same
I'm
page.
kidding, of course. So we've got two important websites.
He's such a joker.
We've got two important websites. The easier one of the two is called goldnewdeal.org. And that's because the platform that I'm running on, we call the Gold New Deal. We're obviously making fun a little bit of the original New Deal under FDR. Gold being the branding color of the Libertarian Party. We believe that we need a whole new relationship between us and our government, so we call it Gold New Deal. So you can go to goldnewdeal.org. We're obviously making a little bit of fun of AOC's Green No Deal as well.
I'm not even going to comment.
With apologies to the fans of yours out there that love the Green New Deal.
Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize.
So that's the easier one. Alternatively, people could go to MikeTerMaaT.com, but you'd have to spell it right. It's got two A's in TermaaT. So if you can't remember how to spell MikeTerMaaT.com, you can go to goldnewdeal.org, and you can flip back and forth between those two websites, and you'll find, especially in MikeTerMaaT.com, but I believe on both websites, there's my real contact information. So if somebody actually wants to give me a call on the phone, they can. You might want to text me first, because if you call me and I don't know who the hell is on the other end,
you're a scammer.
I might assume it's Simon and not answer.
There you go.
And
goodness gracious.
Well, it's never going to be uninteresting. I can tell you that. If he ever calls, it's never going to be uninteresting. That's the least I can say.
Well, with scam calls, I am actually probably the most impolite person on the planet.
Oh, I can.
Because when scammers call, they're open to everything.
Yeah,
and that could.
They'll hang in there.
I agree.
They'll hang in there.
But
from now on, anyone who calls me with heavy bringing, I'm going to be like, Simon, is that you? Is that you? Is that you, buddy?
Yes, mate.
Put Bill on the phone.
This has been a very enlightening podcast. I am thrilled that you came. I'm thrilled that your perspective is going to get out with our small listening audience that I hope will expand.
Let's not call it small.
Your listening audience isn't that small, but it is more powerful than its size.
Right. So, from small acorns grow fucking great big oak trees.
Is that how it works? I've been wondering that.
Be an oak tree.
I don't remember the government telling me that part of the science.
Be an oak tree.
Be an oak tree, buddy. Thank you.
Right on.
Well, as far as we're concerned, and also you're on Twitter at what's your Twitter handle? It's
ter MaaT Mike.
There you go. You can find him on there. That's where I keep up with him the most. And our Twitter handle is at Get On Tap for the Appalachian Podcast. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, which Instagram I've slowed away from. They're shadow banning me for using two A memes and gun memes. But Facebook, we're close to 10,000 followers. If you're listening to this, let's punch it on over there. Gives our 10,000. Twitter's actually the best place. We're getting ready to get Simon signed up. We're going to start doing Twitter Spaces.
Really?
Bring back Mike here, get Spike on there, Brandon, all the boys. We'll talk secession, different things like that. So be on the lookout for that. And for our Patreon subscribers, we're going to take those conversations and probably put them, record them, and then shoot them on our Patreon page. That way, if you can't be on Twitter to listen to these conversations, that's going to be some of our subscriber-only content at patreon.com/getontap, just $3 a month. You're supporting us. You're supporting local. We're taking this money. We're putting back into things like buying steaks for our guests when they come over here and want to join us for an afternoon. So all your money is being put back into the show. We certainly appreciate it. Other than that, take care.
Have at it.
Yeah, have it.
Signal while changing lanes. They pulled him over, found her cocaine. She said, I love you. Yes, I love you forevermore. If you tell that cocaine load is yours. He spent time locked up. She ran around. Everyone knew it. Small country town. While he lay rotten, Lord, she was blowing on his door. And the day they released him, well, he had nowhere to go. Lord, and it's ashes to ashes, and you know it's dust to dust. Just another low down woman that a man can't trust. They released him. No one was there. Had she forgotten? Did she still care? He called up her mama, Lord, and these words he heard her cry. Lord, that no good daughter of mine spend all your money on cocaine, overdosed and died. my good gal left me, and she went away. Now she's gone, I don't worry, because I'm sitting on top of the world.